over 10 million elephants. That's not a typo. The majestic beasts we see today are survivors of a silent war that claimed that many. Their massive tusks, some stretching up to 2 meters, fueled a global demand for centuries. Imagine ivory, more durable and lustrous than any gemstone, becoming the ultimate status symbol across ancient African and Asian markets. Early trade routes, like the historic Silk Road, moved these precious tusks, connecting distant empires. By the 15th century, kingdoms like Kongo, built on ivory wealth, began to rise. Long before European ships even dotted the horizon, the Kingdom of Ghana used ivory passage to build considerable wealth, a significant economic driver by 1000 AD. But this prosperity came at a terrible cost. A single large elephant tusk could weigh over 45 kilograms, a load as heavy as a small car, demanding incredible strength to transport across hundreds of kilometers. Elephants, those walking treasure chests, were targeted relentlessly, their sheer size making them easy marks for hunters wielding spears and bows. By the 16th century, Portuguese traders established coastal outposts, dramatically escalating the trade by introducing firearms and connecting Africa to an insatiable global demand. European ships could carry thousands of pounds of ivory per voyage, more than 5 average sedans worth. Beyond ornamental carvings, ivory served practical purposes like keys for musical instruments, billiard balls, and even medical tools. The appeal was universal. Sadly, populations plummeted, a staggering 90% gone by the early 20th century. Researchers now estimate over 1,000 African elephants were poached daily at the peak of the 19th century trade. That's an almost unimaginable rate of loss. "30,000 years ago, humans were carving ivory, bridging continents with our earliest finds. For millennia, this shimmering material wasn't just beautiful and durable. It was currency, polished into dazzling treasures and recognized across vast distances. So how did it transform societies? Picture this: 15 kilograms of ivory, about your entire month's grocery haul, adorning an ancient Egyptian pharaoh's tomb. That much value for the afterlife. Indigenous African communities understood its worth, but their hunts were for sustenance, not scale, taking ivory from maybe 10% of herds. Their ancient trade routes, though, were already humming with hundreds of thousands of pounds moving annually within Africa, long before colonial powers arrived. Your fingernails grow millimeters a month. An elephant's tusks, however, could add 15 centimeters a year, a lifetime of slow, precious growth. This material's strength, averaging 150 megapascals, rivaled some aluminum alloys, and it could be carved to a shocking half-millimeter thin. Imagine a merchant in 8th century Ghana trading gold dust for ivory, pushing it north along routes that had existed for centuries. But the scale of internal African trade? Honestly, it's dwarfed by the millions of tons later extracted by external powers. We're talking about a material that connected disparate cultures across 2,000 kilometers before recorded history. It shaped kingdoms, funded empires, and nearly erased its source from existence. What does a world look like without this magnificent animal's bounty? "20 iron hoes for a single tusk." That's the kind of power West African kingdoms like Benin wielded. For them, ivory wasn't just shiny stuff. It was the literal foundation of their might. Forget gold, forget jewels. The real treasure came from elephants. The stunning Mask of Idia from the 16th century, a testament to Benin's royal prestige, was carved from one magnificent tusk, symbolizing the Queen Mother's authority. In 15th century Benin, an Oba's control extended to every tusk within 100 miles of his capital, a royal monopoly that kept wealth concentrated. Picture this: an elephant tusk can stretch over 3 meters, a silent, massive declaration of natural dominance. Meanwhile, down south, the Kingdom of Kongo, thriving from the 14th to the 19th centuries, also integrated ivory into its very soul, blending indigenous spirituality with new faiths. Kongo priests crafted exquisite ivory crucifixes, some as tall as 18 inches, a fusion of old gods and new saints. These kingdoms fueled sophisticated trans-Saharan trade networks, a staggering 5,000 kilometers of commerce connecting sub-Saharan Africa to the Mediterranean world. Imagine caravans of 100 camels braving months of desert, hauling over 5,000 kilograms of ivory each year, a logistical epic. But then, around the 15th century, Portuguese traders appeared, and the game changed. Ivory morphed from a regional luxury into a global commodity, its demand exploding for piano keys, billiard balls, and trinkets. Within 2 centuries, this demand surged by an unbelievable 500%. Benin's royal workshops alone consumed over 100 tusks annually, a veritable elephant herd decimated for art. Further south, in the Kongo basin, tusks were so valuable that one could be exchanged for over 1,000 cowrie shells. Kilwa, a Swahili city-state, shipped over 10,000 kilograms of ivory annually. That's like a busload of tusks every single year. Long before European powers arrived, the Swahili coast, with its vast maritime trade routes, was a vibrant conduit connecting the African interior to distant lands like India and China. Traders from the interior would trek hundreds of kilometers, enduring brutal landscapes, to reach these bustling coastal markets. This flourishing trade built magnificent stone cities like Gedi, with populations reaching thousands by the 14th century. Their sophisticated maritime networks stretched for over 4,000 kilometers, connecting African hubs to markets across the Indian Ocean. Imagine navigating those waters in lateen-rigged dhows, carrying cargo loads sometimes exceeding 50 tons. That's heavier than 10 elephants. These mariners relied on advanced instruments like the Kamal, allowing them to measure star altitudes with an accuracy of 1 degree for precise positioning. Swahili traders didn't just export ivory, they imported luxury goods like Chinese porcelain, Indian textiles, and Persian ceramics, enriching their culture. The sheer amount of wealth generated is staggering. Gold and silver recovered from Kilwa could fund 5 superyachts today. Cities like Zanzibar and Mombasa flourished, growing into bustling port cities housing populations exceeding 20,000 residents by the 15th century. Elaborate coral stone mosques and multi-story houses still stand, showcasing urban planning that dates back over 800 years. This demand indirectly spurred the growth of interior trading hubs, establishing supply chains hundreds of miles inland. Before this intense trade, Africa was home to over 20 million elephants. By 1900, that number had plummeted by a staggering 90%. It's a bit creepy, actually. Even by the 17th century, travelers noted declining populations, forcing hunters further inland. An elephant's life can stretch to 70 years, making their tusks potent symbols of wisdom and ancestral knowledge. For many African societies, ivory was far more than just a valuable material. It was imbued with profound cultural and spiritual significance. These weren't just trinkets. Ivory amulets were believed to ward off evil, acting like personal talismans against the unseen. And consider this. For some, a single ivory scepter, passed down through 9 generations, held more sacred value than any king's ransom. Leaders and chiefs brandished elaborate ivory staffs, visual shorthand for authority, connection to the ancestors, and the divine right to rule. Ritualistic use extended to the grave. Ivory was placed in tombs, thought to guide the departed into the afterlife, a final sacred escort. Creepy, right? This deeply spiritual material, so revered, became a global commodity, fueling the very trade that nearly wiped elephants from existence. Only specific spiritual elders could even touch or speak of the sacred ivory. An elephant's tusk, a forever growing tooth, embodied time itself, a testament to resilience for entire communities. Forest elephants, with their denser, straighter tusks, were especially prized for their unique synthetic qualities in sacred carvings. Imagine ivory trumpets so massive, some over 3 meters long, needing 4 strong men just to blow a ceremonial fanfare. The density of quality ivory, 1.8 grams per cubic centimeter, meant carvings could last for centuries, a true testament to permanence. Diviners would cast tiny ivory figures, reading their chaotic fall like a spiritual Ouija board to interpret the ancestors' will. These objects, from bracelets marking manhood to elaborate masks, represented a universe of belief, now threatened by a global demand for a material they held so dear. In 1870, London alone imported 500,000 kilograms of ivory annually, enough to build nearly 6,000 grand pianos. As Europe industrialized and refined its tastes, ivory transformed from a luxury into a mass-market commodity. Consider this. A single piano requires 88 keys, and those typically needed tusks from 2 to 3 adult elephants. Suddenly, the humble billiard ball, once wood, became a symbol of progress, switching almost entirely to ivory by the 1880s. It's a wild thought. This relentless demand fueled an elephant massacre for perfect spheres. Hunting technology shifted dramatically too. Forget spears. High-powered rifles turned hunters into efficient exterminators. European trading companies pushed deeper into Africa, exchanging rifles and cheap liquor for tusks, a Faustian bargain reshaping continents. During peak colonial exploitation, an estimated 50,000 elephants died each year. That's more elephants than live in Kenya today, all for the European appetite. The largest tusks, sometimes 3 meters long and weighing over 100 kilograms, heavier than a baby grand piano, fetched exorbitant prices. Entire elephant populations, like those in the Kongo basin, plummeted by 90% within decades. Their ancient roots fell silent. For the average European family earning about £50 a year, an ivory chess set cost £5. That's a tenth of their yearly wages for carved tusks. Today, that's like spending $5,000 on a new phone. The sheer volume of ivory extracted could fill over 30 Olympic swimming pools. Creepy, isn't it? All that death, all that loss. By 1900, the accumulated wealth from this trade topped $500 million. 80%. That's how much the African elephant population plummeted between 1870 and 1920. Think your Wi-Fi bill is bad? Try having your entire species decimated. Few people know the horrific extent to which colonial powers like Belgium built their extractive industries on the backs of forced labor and the endless slaughter of elephants. King Leopold II, a man who apparently thought modesty was a disease, snagged the Congo Free State in 1885. His grand vision, personal wealth, built on rubber and, you guessed it, ivory. To enforce his impossible quotas, Leopold unleashed the force publique, his own private army. Imagine a band of enforcers, up to 19,000 strong, with a single mandate: get the tusks. These colonial forces weren't exactly handing out compliments. Their methods involved widespread mutilation and murder just to keep the ivory flowing. By 1890, the Congo Free State was shipping out 1,500 tons of ivory annually. That's roughly the weight of 250 adult elephants. Leopold's personal fortune swelled, funding his lavish lifestyle while Africa bled ivory. Other European powers weren't exactly sitting on their hands either. France and Britain were busy systematizing their own ivory extraction operations across their vast colonial holdings. They imposed taxes payable in ivory or grueling labor, effectively coercing local populations into this brutal trade network. The insatiable demand fueled infrastructure projects, railroads and trading posts popped up, specifically designed to funnel tusks from the interior to port cities. Picture this. By the early 20th century, British East Africa alone was exporting over 50,000 kilograms of ivory annually. That's enough to make about 10,000 piano key sets. Your average grand piano. Imagine that. "97% of Uganda's elephants vanished in just 30 years. That's not just a number. It's a continent falling silent. The unchecked colonial push, armed with modern rifles, sparked a catastrophic decline, wiping out over 90% in some areas. Those old muskets we saw? They were replaced by beasts like the .577 Nitro Express, suddenly letting one hunter fire faster than a medieval army could manage a single shot. Then came the titans of the kill, like Frederick Seelis, who was so proficient, he practically wrote a self-congratulatory book. He personally accounted for over 1,000 of them. Entire regions, like Matabeleland, became elephant ghost towns between 1875 and 1880. It felt like clear-cutting a living forest, but the trees were actual elephants. And the motive? Cold cash. By 1890, ivory commanded over £100 sterling per ton in London, worth millions today. The typical thrilling safari morphed into industrial slaughter, less man versus wild and more big business versus big tusks. Huge swaths of Sudan controlled by warlords such as al-Zubair Rama Mansour were systematically stripped. His private armies functioned as mobile ivory extraction units. By 1914, Angola had lost a shocking 95% of its elephants. Think about it. Over 30,000 elephants in Uganda in 1890 dwindled to less than 1,000 by 1920. This wasn't hunting. It was an assembly line for extinction. Hunters received bonuses for kill counts, treating these magnificent creatures like inconvenient, ivory-plated commodities. At its zenith, an estimated 70,000 elephants were killed annually across East Africa alone. So, what remains when the giants are gone? A disrupted ecosystem, a vacuum where large herbivores once roamed, and the unsettling quiet where they used to be. A truly somber thought. "50% of the Congo Free State's revenue between 1885 and 1908, that came from elephants, specifically their tusks. The very infrastructure of colonial empires, from railway lines to military garrisons, was often directly financed by the bloody profits of the ivory trade. Picture a country's entire economic engine powered by the systematic extermination of its largest animal species. That was colonial Africa's grim reality. The Uganda Railway, nicknamed the Lunatic Express, used substantial revenues from ivory duties to subsidize its sprawling 1,060-kilometer construction across East Africa. Across the vast Belgian Congo, colonial outposts sprang up, their existence funded directly by the constant flow of extracted ivory and forced labor. Military expeditions, essential for pacification and resource control, were entirely bankrolled by this ivory wealth. Each tusk, a unique anatomical feature, became a unit of currency, directly converting the elephant's body into the bedrock of a foreign administration. Between 1895 and 1902 alone, the construction of that Lunatic Express consumed thousands of human lives and countless elephant tusks as its ultimate collateral. This was a self-sustaining corporate model where the product being exploited was also the primary capital source funding its own destruction. The demand for ivory created a financial vortex, sucking the life out of elephant herds to fuel the relentless expansion of European empires. From Rhodesia to German East Africa, the profits financed new roads, telegraph lines, and administrative buildings, solidifying colonial presence. As one colonial administrator reportedly stated in 1897, "The elephant is a revenue machine, and we must make him work until he breaks." The bridges you drive over, the government buildings you see, imagine them built by sacrificing the last of a magnificent species. By the 1930s, the stark reality of the Great Slaughter began to set in, with elephant populations dwindling to a mere fraction of their former numbers. Imagine this, 3 to 5 million elephants roaming Africa then, which sounds like a lot, but it's down from over 10 million just a century before. Naturalists, however, were already seeing the red flags waving furiously, even before the numbers got this grim. Early surveys in the 1920s painted a terrifying picture, a chilling prelude to what we now call conservation. In 1923, the very first International Conference on African Wildlife Conservation convened in London, desperately acknowledging the urgent threat and proposing game reserves. But these early protected areas were often as protected as a screen door on a submarine, lacking resources and any real political will for enforcement. Demand for ivory, however, remained insatiable, a relentless beast of burden, and poachers hunted within these so-called sanctuaries. The Great Depression, ironically, threw elephants a bone. Global ivory consumption dipped after 1929, offering a brief unintended pause. But nature doesn't do pauses for long. By the late 1940s, post-war economic recovery cranked the ivory demand dial back to 11. accelerating the illegal hunting once more. Conservation attempts were fragmented, like trying to build a coherent sentence out of random Scrabble tiles, as each colonial territory had its own rules and capabilities. Picture a patchwork quilt of laws. A poached elephant in one district could be legally traded just across an invisible border. The illegal trade networks were quicker than a toddler spotting unattended cookies, exploiting these jurisdictional gaps. And the game departments? Severely underfunded, often a few rangers patrolling vast tracts of wilderness, areas larger than some European countries. An elephant's brain weighs 5 kilograms, a biological supercomputer outranking any other land animal. Meanwhile, evolution was busy cooking up some real magic for these giants, especially when it came to memory. Think of it like a living GPS, holding on to hundreds of crucial waterholes and migration routes spanning thousands of square kilometers for decades. No software updates required. But by the 1880s, hunters with advanced rifles began decimating these herds. Africa saw an estimated 1.5 million elephants in 1890, a number that tragically plummeted to under 100,000 by 1920. Their problem-solving skills are also pretty wild. Researchers observed them using specific logs to reach food, basically inventing their own tools. And consider this: 150 neurons reside just in their trunk, which is more than the entire spinal cord of most mammals. This trunk is an appendage of absurd complexity, capable of the gentlest caress or a bone-crushing grip. Imagine your arm possessing the same number of muscles as an entire elephant's trunk. Elephants even communicate through infrasound, seismic vibrations felt through their feet. Dr. Joyce Poole documented in the 1980s how these deep rumbles, inaudible to humans, coordinate complex group maneuvers and long-distance travel. What's truly remarkable is their self-awareness. Mirror tests show they recognize themselves, a trait shared with only a few other species like great apes. This profound intelligence, this ancient wisdom forged over millions of years, was precisely the asset most threatened by the relentless, devastating ivory trade. It was this mind, this consciousness, that the market for tusks nearly erased forever. For 70 years, elephants live like walking libraries, holding Earth's deepest secrets. Within their tight herds, matriarchs act as these living archives, guiding generations with shared wisdom. They're far more than just large mammals. They architect elephant society, carrying knowledge that would make any human historian envious. Their intricate social networks, where duties are shared, are more complex than many human corporations, all for collective well-being. Imagine a matriarch's knowledge network as thousands of human memories, absolutely essential for herd survival. She remembers water sources for up to 50 years, a feat that would require an army of GPS devices for us. Their communication is a symphony of senses, featuring infrasound rumbles felt through the ground, traveling over 10 kilometers like a distributed network. This sophisticated system coordinates subherds like a global conference call, well beyond our hearing range. When a herd member dies, elephants perform intricate mourning rituals for days, revealing their deep emotional bonds and their childcare. Up to 7 females might help raise a single calf, a collective effort that puts our nuclear families to shame. In Kenya's Tsavo East National Park, some elephants even dig for water using tools, a cultural behavior passed down through generations. This intergenerational knowledge transfer is their superpower, their resilience forged over millennia. Imagine our world without them, certainly quieter, and critically, far less wise. The lifelong bond between daughters and their mothers stands as a testament to their profound family ties. The devastating decline finally spurred global action, culminating in the landmark CITES Appendix I listing in 1989, which effectively banned international commercial ivory trade. Poaching rates dropped by over 80% in protected areas by the early 1990s. It's a remarkable turnaround. This global consensus brought 105 nations together, creating a united front against wildlife trafficking. Initial results were cautiously optimistic. Elephant numbers in East Africa, particularly Kenya, showed signs of recovery. In Zimbabwe, elephant populations swelled by 30% between 1989 and 1999, adding over 5,000 individuals. A great return. With fewer existential threats, matriarchs could lead herds more openly, granting access to diverse foraging grounds. Their overall health saw a significant boost. Scientists observed a noticeable rise in calf survival rates, meaning healthier breeding populations and less frantic parenting. Less stress meant more successful births in several parks, and fewer babies were being targeted. The average tusk weight of legally seized ivory decreased by nearly 50% after the ban, suggesting younger elephants were being targeted less often. In Tanzania's Selous Game Reserve, population stabilized around 40,000 elephants. That's a city of elephants. Conservation groups expanded their efforts, deploying anti-poaching units equipped with advanced tracking technology across thousands of square kilometers. Researchers noted a shift in ivory source. Fewer recent kills meant more stockpiled ivory appearing on black markets. A hopeful but complex sign. Several African nations, including Botswana, Namibia, and South Africa, saw their elephant numbers rebound sufficiently to even consider controlled culling programs. The recovery wasn't uniform, however. West African forest elephants, smaller and harder to survey, remained critically endangered, numbering fewer than 10,000 individuals. Between 2007 and 2014, some 144,000 African elephants were slaughtered. Think about that. That's roughly one elephant lost every 20 minutes. Despite all the bans and the incredible work by conservationists, the fight for their survival is still a brutal one, especially with the illegal ivory trade still raking in over $20 billion annually. You see, persistent demand, particularly in places like China, has given criminal syndicates a powerful, almost irresistible incentive to dust off and revive old poaching networks. These aren't the lone hunters of the past. These are organized gangs armed with night vision and automatic weapons, which makes even these massive creatures tragically vulnerable. This massive $20 billion black market is fueling devastating poaching across Africa's plains and deep forests right now. Poaching gangs are now using advanced gear like infrared goggles, turning the African night into their personal hunting ground, making it incredibly difficult for anti-poaching units to even detect them. These brave units often trek over 500 kilometers on foot during routine patrols. That's like walking from Denver all the way to Salt Lake City. Meanwhile, habitat loss from human expansion is shrinking elephant ranges by a staggering 2% each year, an area the size of New Jersey vanishing annually. So, human-elephant conflict just keeps escalating as both populations fight for dwindling resources, leading to crop raids and, sadly, retaliatory killings. What happens when nature's giants are pushed to the edge? Conservationists are now deploying drones for aerial surveillance. But the sheer scale of the African bush requires thousands of eyes to monitor vast, protected areas, some covering over 300,000 square kilometers. That's larger than the UK. African elephants are at a crossroads, and their future is surprisingly fragile. In some regions, a striking 20% of female elephants are now born tuskless, a rapid, almost eerie adaptation. These aren't just majestic animals. They are vital ecosystem engineers, essentially shaping entire landscapes. Their foraging habits turn dense forests into open grasslands, creating thriving habitats for over 40 other species, from antelopes to wild dogs. Elephants also act as crucial seed dispersers, carrying those seeds up to 60 kilometers from the parent plant, effectively reforesting vast areas after disturbances. Without these giants, some tree species face a 90% decline in regeneration. It's like the entire ecosystem's delivery service just vanished. Even their deep footprints become mini-habitats, holding over 5 liters of water for smaller animals during dry spells. The historical lessons of the ivory trade are a harsh reminder. Economic greed can decimate entire ecosystems. Our collective responsibility now extends far beyond mere regret. The fight for elephant survival continues, with populations still facing immense pressure. Their full recovery could take 80 to 100 years. These magnificent creatures possess an incredible long-term memory, enabling matriarchs to guide herds to vital water sources, knowledge passed down across 50-year spans. New generations are demonstrating remarkable resilience, adapting their behaviors to avoid human conflict zones. Absurdly, an elephant's temporal lobe, crucial for processing emotions, is 3 times larger than a human's. Protecting these iconic animals requires sustained global effort, transcending national borders. That intense poaching pressure has driven a disturbing genetic shift, with those 20% tuskless births serving as a clear signal. Footage of tourists respectfully observing elephants in the wild showcases the positive economic impact of wildlife conservation.